Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Piros of JMP Branding LLC in New York City, and I am one of the founding members of the Career Experts Group. We are a network of master practitioners that share one mission, and that is to guide and support individuals at all stages of their career journey, from new college graduates all the way to the C-suite executives. And each month we generate an information-packed newsletter titled Your Career, Your Future, providing latest career and hiring trends, insights, tips, and advice to help you find your next job, climb the next rung on your career ladder, or just make the most of your current position. Our August 2022 newsletter is focusing on taking time for yourself to rejuvenate, renew, and reinvigorate your life, your passion, and your career. And to help us identify some actions we can take to refocus on ourselves, I am speaking today with my friend and esteemed colleague, Susan Chritton. Susan Chritton is an executive career coach, a master personal branding strategist, a certified applied positive psychology practitioner, and the author of the famous Personal Branding for Dummies. Susan, welcome today. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. And I'm super excited because you have a wealth of information and tips on this topic of positive psychology. And so I am going to jump into our first question for you, which is on the minds of clients that I've had recently. And that is, what advice do you have to stay positive once you receive a job rejection?
You know, that's such a hard thing because none of us likes to be rejected. And even if what I often find is when we start really talking about it, they'll say, yeah, maybe it wasn't the best fit, or, different things like that, but it is hard. So I just want to acknowledge that first you need to acknowledge that and not just go, oh, whatever, because it's hard. Nobody likes to be rejected. And even if you weren't that interested in it, it still often feels hard. What I like to do is just really focus on keeping going, looking at, okay, so who else can we talk to? What else can we work on with that? And also, I would say a big piece with being in positive psychology is not fake positivity, but really, it's acknowledging the different levels of emotion, being optimistic, which is being hopeful, right? So the right thing just hasn't come yet. Let's look at where we can start to really move from that place. So and this happens all the time. And actually I have a real quick story for that. So I have a current client who things were going really slowly, and there was like rejection after rejection. And several months into our work together, she finally told me about the situation she'd come from that she hadn't really acknowledged, where it was pretty bad. And what we realized is she still had a lot of post-traumatic stress from the current, the most recent job. And actually that's where we ended up working, is trying to let go of that, because it was almost compounding on it. So anyway, so we really worked on kind of working on her post-traumatic stress. How does she keep going? Where does she do things for self-care, which is probably where you're going on this, right? Is that how do you take care of yourself during a time like this?
And I think it's important, to your point, when working with your client, there is that post-traumatic stress that I think a lot of clients don't realize they actually go through. So you identifying that and them taking a step back and saying, oh yeah, that's right, I am a little traumatized by this. I think that's really important to be able to identify that. So thank you for that. And Susan, I know you, and I know you've had an amazing career in different industries and lots of things. And I'm curious, what actions have you personally taken to stay motivated after a career setback?
So I think it's been interesting you would ask that, because one of the things, I knew that this was the work I wanted to do in high school. However, there was no path. This was not a field yet. This was not, unless you were going to be a college counselor, which was not what I saw myself doing. So even some of my setbacks have been, oh my gosh, I know I want to move forward, but there's no one to follow. There's no job to apply to. How do I keep kind of almost inventing, looking for pathways? So I think always forever the hopeful person, and always looking at gaps in the market and ways that I can fill them, and being, kind of a funny one. Early on in my career, I heard a speaker, and he was at a UC Berkeley research group. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the work I want to do. I had little kids. I couldn't really work full time at that point, but I just finished my master's. And I literally chased him down the hall after his speech because he had to go somewhere else. And I said, you're exactly the kind of person I want to work for, and the kind of work you're doing. He gave me his card, and basically they created a part-time position for me back when people weren't really doing part-time positions. So I think some of that is being bold, keeping, really working your network, looking for opportunities, even when there are none, and not being afraid to invent something or create it yourself.
I love the word reinvent yourself, because as a master personal branding strategist, that marketing and branding work really, I could see for you, it's really come into play in your entire career, right? You're branding, you're looking at opportunities in the marketplace, you're being bold, you're articulating your value and going after it. But more importantly, having that clarity that this is really what I'd like to do, and staying focused and making it happen.
And a little bit on the piece, which I think too, as you look at how do you stay motivated, is you've always got to go back to the core of who you are, which to me is what our personal branding really, our work is that you've got to go back to that core of who you are and realize how much value it has. And then the trick is always hard to say, where does that fit in the outside world? That's, I think, often where people go, and then they see that as, then they get discouraged. Oh, I may not have value, but you always have value. It's just a matter of finding the right place for it.
Right, exactly. And knowing what that value is, right? And being bold about articulating it. And it's interesting, moving into the self-care piece of this. 2 years ago, there was a number of summits that I spoke at, and they were all geared on self-care. And it's becoming even more and more important based on the last few years of the pandemic. And a lot of organizations now are really focused on, self-care within the organization. What are some of your favorite self-care strategies to avoid career burnout? Because I think we've seen that in, the last couple of years.
I think it's important to not be so singularly focused that work is the only thing you have in your life. First and foremost is, so, all the ones that other people would say as well, which is, like I've gotten where I get out and walk every morning. And even if it's for the shorter walk of 20 minutes, right? That's so little things, just being physically active. I read all the time. I'm in a couple book clubs, and even during COVID, I said, hey, I have a Zoom account, and we kept meeting on Zoom. And a lot of the women were not, that wasn't what they did. But, so from a self-care, I love art. I love projects. I think even doing things that you're not even very good at. I became a beekeeper.
I love this. Yes. Talk
right?
About this. Yes.
So I had a lot to learn. Right. So from the career burnout standpoint is that I had this new hobby and I knew nothing, and I had to connect with new people, and I had to learn new things, and I had to, just participate in a way that I hadn't. So I think from a burnout standpoint, just having these other things that kind of shift your focus really help. So I'm always looking at that with my clients as well.
Yeah. It's really having them tap into creative ways that they can channel their energy, right? So if it's a hobby, or if it's, a dormant passion, that you've put on the back burner for a little bit, revisiting those things. I know during my technology days getting, burnt out, I used to love to cook and bake growing up, and I went back into it, and I absolutely loved it. And I realized that I got so lost in the process when I was cooking and doing all of the ingredients, and that you really start to calm down, and it's really taking care of yourself.
I also think my son is a rolfer. A lot of people may not know what that is, but so he's a body worker, and he's all about movement and how your body carries stress. So I am lectured frequently on that as well.
Well, it's good. He keeps you in line, right?
Right.
Do you have a favorite book where you find encouragement or inspiration?
Well, it's not necessarily a career book. It's an interesting question. So one of my people that I have followed for many years is a woman named Carolyn Mace, and she's kind of a spiritual teacher. And she wrote a book called Intimate Conversations with the Divine. And it's these little 2-page snippets. And that's a place I go because she's got all different kinds of topics, and just makes me pause and think about maybe things from a different perspective. So that's just my particular book. But I think a lot of people have many other ways where you can go, just get a different perspective or something that makes you think in a way that just turns, and this is something I do a lot with my clients too. It's like, how do we reframe things? And I think anything that helps me reframe my thinking, and we all have those days that are our darker days, right? But it just helping me reframe that. And that's something I do for my clients. And let me give you an example of this, because I think this fits in with our conversation. I have a client the other day, and we were talking about barriers. What are personal barriers? What are barriers from other people? And what are barriers from society? And one of his barriers was people pleasing. He felt that he was such a people pleaser that often got in his way. And I said, well, what if we reframed it in a way that said, you're probably really easy to do business with? And he says, you're right. He goes, people love to do business with me because I really try and make it easy and fun to do business with me. And he goes, oh my gosh, that made me feel so much better. And that was great.
I love that.
So as you look at reframing things, I think that's one of the best ways you can, when a job doesn't happen, when you get turned down, when there is kind of that feeling of rejection, how do you, in any way you can, without ignoring first the feeling, how do you reframe something?
Yeah, I was reading something recently about raising your children to be more positive and to sort of overcome some self-doubt and it just, what you just said about reframing, it was something about just your choice of words to yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things was, people say, oh, I have to work out today. Instead of saying I have to work out today, which has a negative connotation, right? You can say, I get to work out today. That simple shift and that reframing is powerful because you're talking to yourself and you're sort of reframing that whole narrative.
Or even, I'm so excited I get an hour at the gym, or I get to go out and take my walk, or whatever.
Yeah, it's those little things, how you speak to yourself. So one of my questions, do you recommend any additional career management resources for your clients to find inspiration? And I think reframing, that's clearly one of them. Do you have any additional resources that you want to highlight?
I have lots of resources. Oh my gosh. Well, of course, there's always Personal Branding for Dummies. We'll mention that one. But
it's a great book. It's a great book.
A couple things that have been interesting resources. There's a fairly new group called the Modern Elder Academy that I've recently been kind of involved in, and I'm one of their career coach references or resources. But they have a class right now on purpose, and that seems to be really helpful for a lot of people. In that they have, different videos and different things. And I recently heard Dan Pink, probably you know who he is, and many people know who Dan Pink is. He has a new book coming out called Regrets. And even though that doesn't sound inspirational, what his point was is that when we look at things that we may have regretted, how do we change our life going forward? So if you were to say 10 years from now, what will I regret that I didn't do now? So that, I mean,
That's
I thought
powerful. That's
it
very
is really
powerful.
powerful, right? So you start to look at your life in 10 years time and you go, why did I waste that? And so, I think there are many people that have such great books too. I love Richard Leider's work. He's all about, purpose at work, and now too looking at sort of aging in the workplace and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think there are many, many books. There's a new one called Strength to Strength. I thought it was very good, a little male oriented for me. I think it's often too women follow a different track if they have families than traditional men in work. And so I think it's very written for traditional career paths, and then, they find purpose at midlife and now they want to give back to the community. And I'm like, okay, well, I did that 20 years ago.
Right.
Now I'm right. So anyway, but I think there are all kinds of things. But again, it's that just infusing your life with other thoughts and opinion, I think help you get clarity about who you are and what you want.
Yes.
So
and I think and to your point, I think once you achieve that, it really helps to keep you centered as you move along in your career.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I love the purpose, any books on purpose, because I do find that particularly with my clients, again, after the last few years, I think that is on the top of the mind of most people right now.
Mm-hmm.
What is my purpose? What do I want for the next 25, 30 years? Maybe you're older and you're thinking, what's the purpose in my current career?
And I'm going to a big mistake a lot of people make with purpose is they think it's a noun. They think it's a something, and purpose really is a verb. I mean, you're on purpose if you're getting up and breathing each day. I mean, that may be a small p purpose, but you're still on purpose, right? Just doing.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Susan.
So purpose is really a verb. It's like, get out and start doing something. You often don't find a purpose by sitting there just contemplating it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then my final question for you is, and I know you probably have many of these, but what's your favorite motivational quote?
Okay, so my very favorite motivational quote is from a fortune cookie many, many, many years ago. And it is, life is a priceless gift. Do not vegetate.
I love that. I love that. Can you say that again? That is just beautiful.
Life is a priceless gift. Do not vegetate.
I love it. Susan, this has been one of my favorite interviews, and I greatly appreciate your time and your insights and your tips. I've known you for some time now. And I think that you're incredibly insightful and you have so much wisdom. Do you have any last tips for our audience?
No, just, really life is a priceless gift and we all have so much to offer, and don't be afraid to just offer a little. It doesn't have to be a lot.
And on that note, I am going to say thank you again. And I hope our listeners really enjoy your amazing tips. So thank you again. Susan Chritton, do you want to highlight your website?
It's just my name, susanchritton.com, and Chritton. And you can find that, or Personal Branding for Dummies. You can always trace me there.
Thank you, Susan. Have a great day.
Thanks.